Hello, welcome to Design Shing. Today we are going to be building a frame. So recently, Erin and I purchased some art from our friend Julia. They're very cool textured paintings, and I want to frame them and hang them on the wall. Now, something interesting about this is that it's actually a canvas board. It's not a canvas, and this makes it easier for an artist to move it around portably and paint, but it's a little bit tricky, maybe, when it comes to framing. Hanging a canvas board on the wall itself, I think would be pretty simple. I think you could just glue a sawhorse on the back and stick it up, but I want these to really be highlighted as a focal point, and I also think that a frame would help tie the two pieces together and really make a statement on the wall. So for the frame for these canvas boards, I want them to be the same, and I'm also looking for a more modern float frame effect. I want it to not be behind glass, kind of like a traditional canvas framing would be. I want the texture to be not hidden away behind some sort of glass or plexi, but there's not like a wood backing to attach it to. So I have some creative solutions, I think. So for selecting my wood, I went to the hobby board section of the Home Depot, and that's where they cut down, a standard board into these like smaller lengths that are easier to walk out with and put in your car. I don't know if it's the most cost-effective way of buying wood, but it's a lot easier to handle, especially if you live in the city and drive a car like me. Also, you don't have to deal with those guys cutting your wood for you, which is kind of nice. And it's easier to kind of browse through all their selections. I selected red oak, and I laid them all out on the floor in the Home Depot, crouched down and made sure I had the most similar and the least warped pieces that they had in the bunch. Each of these 3-foot boards were $5? I don't know. Total, I spent about $50 on wood. The other cool thing about the hobby board section is that they already plane it into these thinner pieces. So this is a 1/2 inch width, and I also got 1/4 inch width. And my idea is that the face of the frame will be that 1/4 inch, and the 1/2 inch is gonna serve as a back. So this piece of wood is 1/2 inch thick by a nominal 2 or an actual 1.5. And this is what I was thinking is going to be the back of the frame. For the face of the frame, I have this 1/4 inch thick piece. So this piece will sit vertically and just butt up against the back. For the art, I want to have a reveal. I was thinking that the wood will kind of shine through and be thicker, and this will sit on top. Now, how am I going to attach the canvas board to the frame? I have this wood, just a square wood dowel. I'll glue that to the back of the canvas board, and that's how I'll screw in and attach it to the frame. My first course of action was to sand all of the boards. I used a random orbital sander and sanded to 220 grit. After all of the boards were sanded, I paired together the 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch boards that were most similar in color and grain. I then used Titebond Type 2 wood glue to attach the 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch boards together at a right angle. I do wish I had been a little more careful in my glue application because it took quite a lot of sanding to take off all of that excess dried glue. So now my two pieces of wood are glued together, and it's been over 24 hours, so they should be completely cured. So now I need to determine how much of a border I want between the foam board and the frame. I decided on 1 inch. I cut my first two pieces, the long side and the short side, using a miter saw and cutting them at a 45-degree angle because I want mitered corners. So now that my first pieces are cut, I can actually use them as a template and just cut the other ones to the size so that they match exactly, and I'm not measuring off of the foam board for each one. Something to keep in mind when cutting corners is the grain pattern. I cut the long side and short side from the same piece of board because I want it to look like the grain wrapped rather consistently around the frame. After cutting all sides and checking the fit of the miters, I glued the corners together using a right angle clamp to hold the pieces in place. Now I only have one right angle clamp, so it's going to be one corner at a time that I'm gluing this thing together, but the first corner is done and it is pretty sturdy and looking pretty good, if I do say so myself. I am not a frame maker, except for that last time I made a frame. Very much a novice, but pretty pleased thus far. Oh, knock on wood. So the big question is, how am I going to attach this foam board to the frame now? Like, how am I gonna get it to stay in there? It's not like a canvas where it's got a piece of wood already wrapped around it. So I'm going to attempt to make my own canvas out of the canvas board by gluing on this square dowel to the back of the board. And it'll be by the square dowel that I get the foam board to attach to the frame. I measured and cut the square dowel pieces so that they sat within the frame. Since this piece would not be visible, I went with a butt joint rather than a mitered corner. I painted the dowels black and white respectively to blend in with the canvas. I just used acrylic craft paint to coat 2 of the 3 sides. The dowels shouldn't show from the front, but just in case they do, they won't stand out. Back to the frame. It was time for more sanding. This part was very time consuming. I could have saved myself a lot of time sanding if I had just been more careful with the glue. Now with my outer frame assembled, it was time to pre-drill holes in the frame and dowels so that I could attach the canvas board to the frame. I started by marking holes 2 inches from either side of the dowel. Something I wish I had a little more foresight to is how I'll be attaching these dowels, which I'm gluing to the canvas board, to the frame itself. I wanted them to be able to screw and unscrew so that in the event that I decide to get this artwork like framed by a real professional and not just me doing my DIY thing, that it would be easy to take it out of the frame. Now, my original idea was that I would screw it in here so it would sit flush. Now, the reason this isn't working out is because it turns out that my drill is just a little bit too big to be able to drill in here and screw in because the frame is already glued together. I should have, before assembling the frame, gone ahead and pre-drilled some holes maybe. I did try to pre-drill, and I ended up splitting the wood, and thankfully I had the foresight to drill like kind of towards the back so I'm not coming out the front, because that would have just been, you know, overall disastrous. But I mean, just like semi-disaster right now, still solvable. I was planning to glue the dowels to the canvas board, but I'm thinking now maybe I could Velcro it so that in the event I want to take the artwork out, you know, this piece could be glued here to the frame, and then I just, voila, unvelcro the canvas board. I think that makes sense. That way the canvas board is what's truly removable. So, you know, roundabout, not smart way, getting to like a kind of smart solution. So I'm gonna just like put this dowel to the side right now. We'll deal with that later. To finish the frame, I am going to be using the polyurethane water-based top coat. So I'm not staining it. And the reason is I'm like a little self-conscious about the imperfections because I'm not like the best woodworker. I'm very novice, and I think stain may call attention to maybe some imperfections, and I'd rather just kind of blend out on the wall. Before applying the polyurethane sealant, I used a tack cloth to carefully wipe the frame to remove any dust left over from sanding. I then applied the polyurethane sealant to the frame using a 1-inch foam brush. Because polyurethane is a water-based product, it causes the wood grain to rise. Grain rise is most apparent after the first coat. I applied 3 coats of polyurethane and was careful to sand smooth between each coat. After the outer frame was finished, I prepared the square dowels to be attached as an inner frame. To avoid drill size issues, I decided to insert eyelets for hanging into the dowels before attaching the dowels to the frame. Once in place, I used wood glue to fix the inner frame to the outer frame. I decided to use wire strung between two eyelets to hang the frame on the wall. Wire makes it a little easier to make the frame level when hanging. The 18 gauge wire I used was way stronger and stiffer than necessary. It would have been easier to use 20 gauge wire, but I wanted to take advantage of the materials I already had on hand. Then it was time to fix the canvas board to the frame. I used Scotch Velcro, which I also already had on hand, but 3M Velcro or command strips could also work.
So I definitely had a period of trial and error, but I am super happy with how these framed canvas boards turned out. I hope that you can learn from my mistakes and create some awesome frames for yourself. Thanks for watching!